My name is Maya Kingston, and I'm 39 years old. 22 years ago, my stepfather kicked me out of the house 3 days after my father's funeral. I was 17. My crime? I refused to call him Dad. My mother stood in the doorway and said nothing. Not a word, not a defense, nothing. I spent the next 4 months sleeping on friends' couches, working double shifts at a coffee shop, and finishing high school with a 4.0 GPA. I built a life from nothing, college on a full scholarship, a career in real estate finance, and eventually, a home of my own. Last month, they showed up on my doorstep, broke, desperate, begging for $50,000. What I said next changed everything. Before we dive into this story, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what you're about to hear. And if you're comfortable, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I love knowing I'm not alone in this. Let me take you back to where it all began. I was 15 when my father died. David Kingston. That was his name. He had this way of making you feel like you were the most important person in the world when he looked at you. He taught me to change a tire in our driveway on a Saturday morning, grease under our fingernails, laughing when I couldn't get the lug nuts loose. He taught me to cook his mother's lasagna recipe, to balance a checkbook, to stand up straight when I felt small. The stroke came without warning. One minute he was reading the newspaper at the kitchen table, the next he was gone. Mom and I were devastated. The house felt too big, too quiet. Every room held a memory that hurt to walk through. His coffee mug still sat on the counter for weeks because neither of us could bring ourselves to put it away. 18 months later, Mom started dating Richard Thompson. I wanted her to be happy. I really did. She'd been so sad for so long, and when Richard came around, she smiled again. She laughed. I thought maybe that was enough reason to give him a chance. Richard was polite at first. He'd ask about my day, compliment Mom's cooking, offer to help with yard work. But there were small things, little corrections. He'd mention how I should set the table differently, how the living room furniture would look better rearranged, how his house needed certain rules. His house, not our house. His. I noticed, but I didn't say anything. I told myself I was being oversensitive, that I should be grateful Mom had found someone, that maybe this was what moving forward looked like. I didn't know then that those small corrections were just the beginning. 3 months after Richard moved in, the photographs started disappearing. Not all at once, that would have been too obvious. First, the framed picture of Dad and me at my 8th grade graduation vanished from the hallway. Then the family portrait from our last vacation together, the one where we're all sunburned and grinning at the beach, was gone from the mantel. "Where are the photos?" I asked Mom one afternoon. She didn't look at me. "In the basement. Richard thought, it's too painful to look at them every day, honey. We need to move forward." Move forward. Those words became her mantra. The next week, Dad's tools disappeared from the garage. The socket set he'd used to teach me about cars. The level he'd let me hold while he hung pictures. The tape measure with his initials scratched into the handle. "We needed the garage space," Richard explained when I asked. His tone was casual, like he was discussing the weather. "I sold them to a guy at work. Got a good price." I felt something crack inside my chest. Those weren't just tools. They were the last tangible pieces of my father. The things his hands had touched, the objects that proved he'd existed, that he'd been real, that he'd loved me. I tried to protest. "Those were Dad's. You can't just—" "Maya," Mom's voice was tired. "We have to move forward. Holding on to these things isn't healthy." But I couldn't let everything go. Late that night, I snuck into the basement and found the boxes. I took one thing. Just one. A small wrench Dad had used to fix my bike when I was 10. I hid it in the back of my desk drawer, wrapped in an old t-shirt. I realized then that moving forward, in their language, meant erasing Dad completely. But the worst part wasn't losing his things, it was losing my voice. The demand started about 6 months after Richard moved in. Maya, I think it's time you started calling me Dad. We were sitting at dinner. Mom had made pot roast. Richard had just finished complaining that it was too salty. I set down my fork carefully. I'm not comfortable with that. His jaw tightened. I'm your father now. It's disrespectful to call me Richard. I already had a dad. My voice was quiet but firm. I call you Richard because that's your name. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Mom reached across the table, her hand hovering near mine, but not quite touching. It would mean a lot to him, Maya. He's trying so hard to be a family with us. I'm not trying to be difficult, I said. But Dad was my father. Richard is. Richard. He pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loud against the floor. Ungrateful, he muttered, loud enough for us both to hear. Then he walked out. Mom looked at me with something like disappointment. Would it really be so hard? Just to keep the peace? After that, dinners became minefields. Richard would sigh heavily whenever I spoke. He'd correct the way I passed dishes. He'd mention, casually, how other families showed respect to their step-parents, how some children knew how to be grateful for the roof over their heads. I started eating faster, finishing my plate in 10 minutes and excusing myself to my room, where I'd do homework with my door closed and music playing loud enough to drown out the sound of their voices downstairs. I wasn't trying to be difficult. I was trying to honor the only father I'd ever loved. I didn't know that my refusal would cost me everything. I need to take you back further, to the day we buried my father. I was 15 years old, standing beside his grave in a black dress Mom had bought the day before. The sun was too bright. It felt wrong that the weather could be so beautiful when everything inside me was breaking. The pastor said words I didn't hear. People came up and squeezed my shoulder and said things like, "He's in a better place," and "Time heals all wounds." I nodded because that's what you do, but I didn't believe them. When everyone else had left, I stayed. Mom was talking to relatives by the cars. I knelt down and placed my hand on the fresh dirt. I'd brought something with me. The small wrench from Dad's toolbox, the one he'd used to fix my bike. I held it in my palm, feeling the weight of it. "I'll always be your daughter, Dad," I whispered. "Always. No matter what happens. No matter who comes into our lives. You're my father. Only you." I made a promise that day. I promised I'd never forget him. Never let anyone replace him. Never pretend he hadn't been the most important person in my world. I meant it with every fiber of my being. 18 months later, when Richard started asking me to call him Dad, that promise was the only thing I had left to hold on to. It was my line in the sand. The one thing I could control when everything else was being taken from me. I was the only one still holding on to Dad's memory. Mom had already started letting go. I could see it in the way she packed away his clothes, donated his books, stopped mentioning his name at dinner. That promise would become both my strength and my curse. About a year after Richard moved in, he called a family meeting. We sat in the living room, the same room where Dad and I used to watch old movies on Friday nights. Richard stood. Mom and I sat on the couch. "This house has rules," he began. His voice was calm, controlled. "Everyone follows them, no exceptions." He pulled out a piece of paper, an actual printed list. Curfew, 8 p.m. on weekdays, 9 p.m. on weekends. No friends in the house without explicit permission. No going anywhere without checking with him first. Chores completed daily and inspected. Dinner at 6 p.m. sharp, everyone present. I was 17 years old. My friends were staying out until 11. They were going to movies, to parties, to late-night diners. I was being treated like I was 12. "This is ridiculous," I said. "I'm almost an adult." "You're under my roof." Richard folded the paper and set it on the coffee table. "If you don't like it, you're free to leave." The words hung in the air. Mom stared down at her hands. She didn't defend me, didn't tell him he was being unreasonable, Didn't remind him that this had been Dad's house first, that we'd lived here long before he arrived. She said nothing. "I'm going to my room," I said quietly. "Dinner's in an hour," Richard called after me. "Don't be late." I closed my bedroom door and sat on my bed, staring at the acceptance letter I'd hidden in my desk drawer. Full scholarship to State University. I'd gotten it 2 weeks ago and hadn't told anyone yet. I was waiting for the right moment. Maybe there wouldn't be a right moment. I didn't know he'd take me up on that offer. "You're free to leave," sooner than I thought. The breaking point started over something small. Dinner, Tuesday night, meatloaf and mashed potatoes. "Maya, pass the salt, please," Richard said. "Sure, Richard." His fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "I've asked you to call me Dad." "I'm not comfortable with that." "You're being disrespectful." "I'm being honest." Mom set down her glass too hard. Water sloshed onto the table. "Maya, can't you try, for me?" I looked at her. Really looked at her. When had she stopped being on my side? "I had a dad," I said slowly. "He's gone. That doesn't mean I get a replacement." Richard stood up, his chair scraped back. "I've done everything for this family. I put a roof over your head. I pay the bills. And you can't even show me basic respect." "You want respect?" The words came out before I could stop them. "Respect is earned. You can't demand it." "That's it." His voice was dangerously quiet. "Go to your room." "I'm 17, not 7. Go to your room." I stood up, looked at Mom one more time, waiting for her to say something, anything. She was staring at her plate like it held the answers to the universe. I walked upstairs, closed my door, sat on my bed and felt the walls closing in. Downstairs I could hear them talking. Not the words, just the murmur of voices. Mom's apologetic tone, Richard's clipped responses. I pulled out my phone and texted my best friend Jennifer. "Can I crash at your place this weekend?" She wrote back immediately. "Always. You okay?" I didn't answer. I wasn't sure what okay meant anymore. I wasn't trying to hurt him. I was trying to keep my father's memory alive. The control tightened like a noose. Friday afternoon, Jennifer texted. "Movie tonight? That new Marvel thing?" I asked at dinner. "Can I go see a movie with Jennifer tonight?" Richard didn't look up from his plate. "Not tonight. You have chores." "I finished them. I'll be the judge of that." I cleaned the kitchen, did the laundry, vacuumed the living room. "Your tone is disrespectful." He finally looked at me. "The answer is no." I felt my chest tighten. "Why?" "Because I said so." Mom cut her chicken into smaller and smaller pieces. She might as well have been invisible. I went upstairs and called Jennifer. My voice shook when I told her I couldn't make it. "Maya, what's going on?" She sounded worried. "You've canceled 3 times this month. Just family stuff. Is he being awful again?" "I can't talk about it right now." "Okay, but I'm here, whenever you need me." I hung up and stared at my ceiling. The glow-in-the-dark stars Dad had helped me put up when I was 10 were still there, faded now but still visible. I felt like a prisoner. The worst part was knowing that if I pushed back too hard, Richard would take it out on Mom. He'd be cold to her, silent treatment for days. And she'd blame me for causing trouble, for not just going along, for making everything difficult. So I stayed quiet. I followed the rules. I came home by 8. I asked permission to breathe, but inside, I was planning. The scholarship letter was still hidden in my drawer. 4 more months until graduation. Then I'd be gone. I was protecting Mom. But who was protecting me? The walls were closing in. I had to find a way out. The letter arrived on a Thursday in March. I got home from school before Mom and Richard. The mail was sitting on the kitchen counter. I was flipping through bills and catalogs when I saw it. State University, Office of Financial Aid. My hands shook as I opened it. "Congratulations! You have been awarded a full scholarship." Full scholarship. Tuition, room, board, books, everything. I read it 3 times to make sure it was real. Then I folded it carefully and slipped it into my backpack. I couldn't leave it out. Couldn't risk Richard seeing it before I was ready. That night, I hid it inside my AP history textbook. Every few days, I'd take it out and read it again, just to remind myself that escape was possible. My plan was simple: save every penny from my weekend shifts at the coffee shop, keep my grades up, graduate in June, move into the dorms in August, never look back. I just had to survive until June, 4 more months, then I'd be free. I started picking up extra shifts, told Mom I was studying at the library when I was actually working, stashed cash in an envelope taped to the underside of my desk drawer. $200, $300, $400. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Money Richard couldn't control. Money that would buy me a bus ticket, new sheets for my dorm room, a sense of independence. I felt lighter, knowing I had a way out. The rules didn't choke me as much. The silence at dinner didn't feel as suffocating. Then one afternoon, I was rushing to grab my textbook before leaving for work. The scholarship letter slipped out and fell to the floor. Right as Richard walked past my open bedroom door, he picked it up, and everything changed. Richard stood in my doorway holding the letter. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Just read it, then read it again. "So you're planning to leave?" His voice was eerily calm. My heart hammered. "I'm going to college. That's what people do." "Without telling us?" "I was going to tell you." That was only half true. I'd planned to tell them after I'd already moved out, when it was too late for Richard to interfere. He stepped into my room, set the letter on my desk. His finger tapped it once, twice. "Full scholarship. That's impressive." He wasn't smiling. "You think you're so independent, so smart, but you're still under my roof, eating my food, using my electricity. It's not your—" I bit off the words. "Not your house. It was Dad's house first. But saying that would only make things worse. We'll see if you make it to June." He left the letter on my desk and walked out. I stared at the paper. He hadn't torn it, hadn't taken it, but the threat in his voice was clear. I grabbed my phone and texted Jennifer. "Emergency. Need you to keep something safe for me." 20 minutes later, we met at the coffee shop where I worked. I showed her the letter. "Take a picture," I said. "Keep it on your phone. If anything happens, I need proof that I got this scholarship." Jennifer's eyes went wide. "Maya, what's going on? Is he threatening you?" "Just, please, keep the picture safe." She took 3 photos from different angles. "I've got it. I promise." I folded the letter and put it back in my textbook. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made a terrible mistake. I didn't know what he meant by "we'll see," but I was about to find out. That night, I knocked on Mom's bedroom door. She was folding laundry. Richard was downstairs watching TV. "Mom, I need to talk to you." She glanced at the door. "Is this about the scholarship?" So Richard had already told her. "He's scaring me." The words tumbled out. "I feel like he's going to do something. The way he looked at me today." "Maya." She set down the shirt she was folding. "Richard just wants respect. If you'd call him Dad, if you just try to meet him halfway—" "I can't." My voice cracked. "You know I can't." "Then I don't know what to tell you." I stared at her. This woman who'd raised me, who'd sung me to sleep when I had nightmares, who'd taught me to braid my hair and bake cookies and stand up for myself. When had she stopped being my mother? "He's going to kick me out," I said quietly. "You know that, right? He's looking for an excuse, and he's going to kick me out." Mom looked away. "You're being dramatic." "Am I?" I wanted to grab her shoulders and shake her, make her see what was happening. "Mom, please. I need you to have my back. Just this once." She picked up another shirt, started folding. "You're almost 18. Maybe some distance would be good for everyone." The room tilted. Distance. She was already preparing herself for me to leave, or for Richard to make me leave. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." I walked out, closed the door behind me, went to my room, and sat on my bed in the dark. Mom looked away. And I knew I'd already lost her. 3 days later, he made his move. Friday night, the bus was late, 15 minutes late. Not my fault. But when I walked through the door at 8:17 p.m., Richard was waiting in the hallway. Where were you? The bus was late. I texted Mom. That's not an excuse. You're grounded. I stopped, set down my backpack. For what? I didn't do anything wrong. Don't talk back to me. Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the weeks of walking on eggshells. Maybe it was the way he'd threatened me about the scholarship. Maybe it was just exhaustion. You're not my father! The words came out louder than I intended. Stop acting like you are! His face went red. He slammed his palm against the wall. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. Mom came running from the kitchen. What's going on? She needs to learn respect, Richard said. His voice was shaking. Or she can leave. I waited for Mom to defend me, to tell him he was overreacting, to remind him that I was her daughter. She looked at Richard, then at me, and said nothing. Fine. Richard turned to me. Pack your things. You're leaving. Tonight. The floor disappeared beneath my feet. What? You heard me. This is my house, my rules. You don't respect me, you don't stay. I looked at Mom. Mom, please. Her voice was barely a whisper. Maybe it's best if you stay with a friend for a while. A while? I felt tears burning. Or forever? She didn't answer. The silence was louder than any words could have been. I waited for Mom to defend me. She looked at Richard, then at me, and said nothing. This was it. I walked upstairs in a daze. My hands shook as I pulled my old backpack from the closet. I started grabbing clothes, jeans, shirts, underwear. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just kept stuffing things in. The wrench. I grabbed Dad's wrench from my desk drawer, the photo of us at my 8th grade graduation, the scholarship letter, my laptop, phone charger, toothbrush. What do you pack when your whole life is being ripped away? Richard appeared in my doorway. You're not taking anything I paid for. This is my stuff. The laptop, I bought that. For school. For my homework. Leave it. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him feel a fraction of the pain he was causing. But what would be the point? I left the laptop on my desk, zipped up my backpack. It was half empty. 17 years of life, and it all fit in one bag. I walked past him. He didn't move, didn't say goodbye, didn't even look at me. Mom was standing at the bottom of the stairs. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. Not really. Maya, don't. I couldn't hear excuses, couldn't hear her try to justify this. Just don't. Where will you go? Why do you care? That was cruel. I knew it was cruel. But she'd stood there and let him throw me out. She'd chosen him over me. I opened the front door. The night air was cold. I didn't have a jacket, hadn't thought to pack one. I walked down the driveway. Didn't look back. I walked past him with my backpack. He didn't even look at me. Neither did Mom. Behind me, the door closed. I heard the lock click. I called Jennifer from the corner of my street. It went to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. I remembered then. Her family had gone to visit her grandparents upstate. She'd mentioned it last week. They'd be gone all weekend. I had $43 in my wallet. Not enough for a hotel. Not even a cheap one. The bus stop was 2 blocks away. I walked there and sat on the bench. The streetlight above me flickered. A car drove past, music thumping. I pulled my knees to my chest and tried to think. I could go to school Monday morning, use the bathroom to wash up, pretend everything was normal, just a few more months until graduation. I could do this. I had to do this. Around midnight, a police car slowed down. The officer rolled down his window. You okay, miss? I'm fine, just waiting for a ride. He looked at me for a long moment. at my backpack, at the fact that no ride was coming. It's not safe to be out here alone this late. My friend's coming soon. He didn't believe me, I could tell, but he nodded and drove away. I waited until his taillights disappeared. Then I curled up on the bench, using my backpack as a pillow. I didn't sleep, just lay there staring at the stars. Dad's stars, the same ones we used to look at from our backyard. I watched people walk by, a couple holding hands, a man walking his dog, a woman in scrubs, probably heading to a night shift. No one stopped. No one asked if I was okay. That night, I learned what it felt like to be invisible, not just at home, but everywhere. Jennifer came back Sunday night. I was waiting on her porch. "Oh my God, Maya." She pulled me inside. "What happened?" I told her everything. She cried. I didn't. I think I was too tired to cry. Her parents were kind but cautious. They let me stay a few nights, but made it clear they couldn't harbor a runaway long term. They didn't want legal trouble. I understood. I didn't blame them. So I rotated. 3 nights at Jennifer's, 2 at the apartment of a coworker from the coffee shop, 1 night at the 24-hour diner, nursing a cup of coffee and doing homework until sunrise. I picked up every shift I could. Morning shifts before school, evening shifts after, weekends, doubles. My manager, Carol, was in her 50s with kind eyes. She never asked questions, just scheduled me as much as I wanted. I saved everything, every dollar, every quarter in tips. At school, I kept my grades up. 4.0 GPA, perfect attendance. I showered in the gym locker room before first period, kept a change of clothes in my locker, smiled when teachers asked how I was doing. "Great, Mrs. Peterson, just busy with college applications." No one knew I was homeless. In May, I walked across the stage at graduation. The principal called my name. I accepted my diploma. The audience clapped. Mom and Richard weren't there. I scanned the crowd anyway, some stupid part of me hoping they'd show up. That Mom would be standing in the back, realizing what she'd lost. But no, just empty seats. Jennifer's family cheered for me. Carol from the coffee shop was there, waving. I walked across that stage alone, but I walked with my head high. Every shift, every late night studying, it was fuel. I wasn't just surviving, I was preparing to thrive. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, if you've ever had to choose between your truth and someone else's comfort, I see you. This story is for you. Before we continue, if this resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe, and drop a comment. Tell me, have you ever had to set a boundary that cost you a relationship? Let's talk about it. Your story matters. Now let me tell you what happened 22 years later. 22 years. That's how long it's been since I walked out of that house with everything I owned in a backpack. I'm 39 now. I built a life I'm proud of. College was hard. I worked 2 jobs while taking a full course load. Business administration with a focus on finance. I graduated with honors and no debt, thanks to that scholarship and a lot of ramen noodles. After graduation, I got a job at a real estate firm, started as an assistant, worked my way up, learned everything I could about property management, investment analysis, market trends. 10 years ago, I started my own consulting business. Small, just me and 2 employees, but we do good work. We help people make smart real estate investments. We've built a solid reputation. 5 years ago, I bought my first house. Not a mansion, not fancy, but it's mine. 3 bedrooms, a small yard, a garden where I grow tomatoes in the summer. It's in a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets and neighbors who wave when they see you. I paid cash. No mortgage. No one can take it from me. Jennifer is still my best friend. She's married now, 2 kids. I'm their favorite aunt. We have dinner every Sunday. I never married, never had kids of my own. Some people ask if I'm lonely. I'm not. I have friends. I have work I love. I have a life I chose. And I have something else. Something more important than any of that. I have peace. For 22 years, I didn't hear from Mom or Richard. Not a birthday card, not a Christmas text, nothing. I built this life brick by brick. No one handed me anything. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had something better, my own respect. And then, last month, my doorbell rang. It was a Saturday afternoon in September. I was in the garden, pulling weeds, enjoying the late summer sun. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Jennifer and her family were at a soccer game. I'd planned to spend the day working in the yard and reading on the porch. I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked to the front door. Through the window, I saw two people standing on my porch. For a moment, I didn't recognize them. The man was thin, stooped, gray hair, deep lines around his mouth. He wore a wrinkled button-down shirt and khakis that hung loose on his frame. The woman beside him looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair was completely white. She wore a cardigan despite the warm weather, and she was clutching a purse with both hands. Then the man looked up, and I saw his eyes. Richard. My hand froze on the doorknob. 22 years. And here they were. And I opened the door slowly, stood in the doorway, didn't invite them in. Maya. Richard's voice was hoarse. It's been a long time. I didn't respond, just looked at them, really looked. They'd aged badly. Mom's hands were shaking. Richard couldn't quite meet my eyes. Can we? Mom's voice was thin. Can we come in? Why are you here? The question hung in the air. Richard cleared his throat, shifted his weight, looked at Mom. She nodded, encouraging him. We need to talk to you, he said. It's important. I crossed my arms, leaned against the doorframe. I stood in the doorway of the home I built. And they stood on the porch, asking for permission to enter. I didn't invite them in, not yet. I needed to know what they wanted. The silence stretched. Richard cleared his throat again, and what he said next made my blood run cold. We're in trouble. Richard's voice cracked. Medical bills. The house is in foreclosure. We have no one else to turn to. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Mom stepped forward. Maya, we know it's been a long time, but we're desperate. We're family. Family. That word from her mouth, after 22 years of silence. You thought of me. My voice was flat. After all this time. You're doing well. Richard gestured vaguely at my house. We heard you have your own business. We just need help, just temporary. How much? They looked at each other. Mom spoke. $50,000. We'd pay you back. It's just a loan. $50,000. The same amount it would have cost to support me through 4 years of college if they hadn't kicked me out at 17. I didn't say that, not yet. And you thought I'd just give you money after what you did? Maya, please. Mom's eyes were wet. We know we made mistakes. Mistakes. I repeated the word slowly. Is that what we're calling it? Richard shifted uncomfortably. We're not here to rehash the past. We need help now. The past. I felt a laugh building in my chest, not a happy laugh. You mean when you kicked me out 3 days after my father's funeral? Mom flinched. You mean when I was 17 and homeless and you didn't care where I slept? That's not fair, Richard started. Fair? I looked at him, really looked at him. You want to talk about fair? I could have slammed the door. Part of me wanted to, but I didn't, because I wanted them to hear this. They didn't come to apologize. They came because they needed something. I took a breath, steadied myself. Let me make sure I understand. My voice was calm, measured. You're here because you need money. We're desperate, Richard said. You were desperate once, when Dad died, and you had me, a 17-year-old kid who just lost her father. I was desperate too. Mom opened her mouth, closed it. I needed you, I continued. I needed a home. I needed a mother. I needed someone to tell me it was going to be okay. Maya, that was different. How? I looked at her. How was it different? She didn't answer. You kicked me out. You told me I wasn't family unless I called him Dad. I refused, so you threw me away. We gave you a roof over your head for years, Richard started. That was my father's house. The words came out sharp. Not yours. You moved into his house, slept in his bed, erased every trace of him, and then you took it from me. Richard's face turned red. We're not here to argue about the past. No, you're here to ask for money. I stepped back slightly. From the daughter you abandoned. Mom was crying now, quiet tears running down her cheeks. I'm sorry. We're sorry. We don't have anywhere else to go. And whose fault is that? The question hung in the air. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't screaming. I was just clear. And that clarity was more powerful than any scream could have been. I wasn't angry. I was clear. And that clarity was more powerful than any scream. My neighbor, Marcus, was watering his lawn across the street. He glanced over, looked away, then looked back again. People were starting to notice. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Marcus had stopped watering. He was standing there, hose in hand, watching. Mrs. Williams from next door came out to get her mail. She paused at her mailbox. Richard noticed. His eyes darted to the neighbors, then back to me. Can we discuss this inside? His voice dropped. This is private. No, I didn't move from the doorway. You came to my door. We'll talk here. Maya, people are watching. Mom's voice was pleading. Good, let them watch. Richard's jaw tightened. He tried a different approach. Look, we understand you're upset, but we gave you a home. We fed you. We clothed you. For years. That was my father's house, I repeated, louder this time. My father's money, his life insurance, his savings. You didn't give me anything. You took from me. Marcus started walking over. Everything okay, Maya? I'm fine, Marcus. Thank you. He didn't leave, just stood at the edge of my yard, arms crossed. Richard glared at him, then back at me. You're being unreasonable. We're family. You keep using that word. I felt something settle in my chest, a certainty. Family protects each other. Family shows up. You did neither. We made mistakes. You made choices. I cut him off. You chose to kick me out. You chose not to check if I was safe. You chose silence for 22 years. Mom sobbed. I should have done more. I know that now. You're right, you should have. Mrs. Williams was still standing by her mailbox, listening. You wanted respect? Here's some truth. Respect is earned, and you never earned mine. Richard's face turned red. But I wasn't done. I held up one finger. Wait here. I went inside, grabbed the folder I'd kept for 22 years, came back out. I kept this. For 22 years. I opened the folder, pulled out the scholarship letter, the acceptance letter, my first semester transcript showing I'd worked 3 jobs while maintaining a 3.8 GPA. I paid for college myself. I worked 3 jobs. I slept on couches and in 24-hour diners. I didn't ask anyone for help. Marcus stepped closer. Maya, are these legal documents? Yes. I handed him the scholarship letter. Full merit scholarship, awarded 3 weeks before they kicked me out. He read it carefully. His expression darkened. She was 17? He asked Richard. Richard didn't answer. Marcus is a lawyer. He looked at the financial aid forms, the work study records, the bank statements showing I'd been financially independent since I was 17. These documents prove you were emancipated in practice, if not legally. Marcus handed them back to me. You supported yourself completely. That doesn't change the fact that we raised you, Richard tried. You didn't raise me. I cut him off. My father did. You just occupied space. I pulled out one more thing. The wrench. Dad's wrench, still wrapped in the old t-shirt. This is all I have left of him. Because you sold everything else. His tools, his belongings. You erased him. Mom's face crumpled. This scholarship saved my life. And you tried to take it from me. Remember? You told me I wouldn't make it to graduation. Richard's mouth opened. Closed. The documents didn't just prove I was independent. They proved I never needed them. Marcus looked at Richard and Mom with something like disgust. Then he looked at me and nodded. I put the documents back in the folder, held it against my chest. I'm not giving you money, not a loan, not a gift, nothing. Mom's face crumpled. Maya, please, we're your family. No. The word came out firm, final. Family protects each other. Family shows up. You didn't. You're being cruel, Richard said. I'm being honest. There's a difference. Mom reached out like she might touch my arm. I stepped back. I'm sorry. Her voice broke. I should have done more. I should have protected you. You're right. You should have. But you didn't. And now we both have to live with that. I looked at Richard. You told me that if I didn't like your rules, I was free to leave. I left. I built a life. And now you want me to save you from the consequences of your choices. We're going to lose everything, Mom whispered. I lost everything when I was 17. I felt tears burning, but I didn't let them fall. And I survived. You will too. How can you be so cold? Richard's voice shook. I'm not cold. I'm just done. I stepped back toward my door. I hope you figure things out. I really do. But I'm not your solution. I'm not your backup plan. I'm not the daughter you can throw away and pick back up when it's convenient. Mom was crying openly now. Please. I'm sorry, but no. I started to close the door. Richard put his hand out. You'll regret this. I looked at his hand, then at his face. No, I won't. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently. Because I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. Through the window, I watched them walk back to their car, an old sedan with a dented bumper. They drove away. Setting boundaries isn't cruel. It's self-respect. If this story is hitting home for you, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to say no to family? How did it feel? Was it the right decision? Drop a comment below. Your story matters. I read every single one. Okay, let's talk about what happened after they left. Because the story doesn't end there. I stood in my hallway for a long moment. My hands were shaking. Then there was a knock on the door. Marcus. Hey. His voice was gentle. I'm sorry you had to go through that. It's okay. It was a long time coming. For what it's worth, you handled that with a lot of grace. He paused. More grace than they deserved. I didn't know what to say to that. If you need anything, he continued, I'm right across the street. And if they come back and harass you, call me. That's what neighbors are for. After he left, I sat on my couch and stared at the wall. I expected to feel guilty. I expected to second-guess myself. But I didn't. I felt light. The next morning, Mrs. Williams knocked on my door. She was holding a plate covered in foil. Banana bread, she said. I heard some of what happened yesterday. I hope I'm not overstepping, but you did the right thing. Thank you. I raised 3 kids on my own after my husband left. She patted my hand. I know what it's like when family lets you down. You don't owe them anything just because you share blood. Over the next few days, other neighbors stopped by. Mr. Chen from 2 doors down brought his wife's homemade dumplings. The Johnsons invited me to their backyard barbecue. People I'd waved to for 5 years but never really talked to suddenly became community. I expected judgment. Instead, I got support. It was unexpected and healing. I realized something. I'd spent so long being afraid of what people would think if they knew my story. But the truth was, most people understood. Most people had their own stories of family dysfunction and hard boundaries. I wasn't alone. That evening, I called Jennifer. "You're not going to believe what happened. Try me." I told her everything: the doorbell, the request for money, the conversation on the porch, the neighbors watching, my refusal. When I finished, there was silence on the other end. "Jen? I'm just—" Her voice was thick. "I'm so proud of you. I feel like I should feel worse about it." "Why? They kicked you out when you were 17. They didn't check on you for 22 years, and now they show up asking for money?" She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. The audacity. Mom was crying. Good. Maybe she should have cried 22 years ago when her daughter was sleeping in bus stations. I hadn't told Jennifer about the bus station, but she'd guessed. She'd always been able to read between the lines. "You remember that night you came back from your grandparents' trip?" I asked. "And I was sitting on your porch?" "Of course I remember. You saved my life. You know that, right?" "Maya," her voice softened, "you saved your own life. I just gave you a couch to sleep on for a few nights. It was more than that." "I know, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat." She paused. "Listen, I'm coming over this weekend. I'm bringing wine and Thai food. We're going to sit on your beautiful porch that you bought with your own money, and we're going to celebrate you standing up for yourself." "You don't have to. I want to. Besides, the kids want to see Aunt Maya." After we hung up, I sat on my porch and watched the sun set. Jennifer was there when I had nothing. She reminded me I was worth fighting for. 3 weeks later, I ran into someone from my old neighborhood, Mrs. Patterson. She'd been our neighbor when I was growing up. She'd brought casseroles after Dad died. We were both at the grocery store. She recognized me first. "Maya Kingston? Oh my goodness, look at you." We chatted. She asked about my life. I kept it vague. Then she said, "I heard your mother and stepfather had to move." I went still. "Oh?" "Lost their house. Foreclosure. Such a shame." She shook her head. "They're living with Richard's brother now, out in Millbrook." Millbrook, a small town 2 hours away. "Richard's health isn't good," she continued. "Heart problems, I heard. And the medical bills just piled up. They tried to get help from family, but—" She trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "But what?" "Well, apparently Richard burned a lot of bridges over the years. His brother took them in, but it's not a happy situation. I heard through the grapevine that no one else in the family would help them." I absorbed this information slowly. "They asked you for help, didn't they?" Mrs. Patterson's eyes were kind. "I heard they tracked you down. Small towns. Everyone knows everything." "They did. And you said no." "I did." She nodded slowly. "Good for you. After what they did to you, well, some people make their own beds." After she left, I stood in the produce aisle holding a bag of apples. They'd lost their house, lost their independence, were living on someone else's charity. I waited to feel something, satisfaction, vindication, something, but I felt nothing. And that was okay. I didn't celebrate their misfortune, but I didn't mourn it either. They made their choices. That Saturday, I sat in my garden with a cup of coffee. The tomatoes were doing well. I'd planted them in May, and now they were heavy with fruit. I'd learned to garden through YouTube videos and trial and error. Dad would have been proud. I thought about Richard and Mom, about the choice I'd made. For years, I wondered if I was too harsh, if I should have helped them, if saying no made me as cold as they'd been. But then I remembered. They didn't help me when I was 17 and homeless, when I was scared and alone and had nowhere to go. They made a choice then. I made a choice now. I realized something sitting there in my garden, surrounded by plants I'd grown with my own hands. Saying no wasn't cruelty. It was self-preservation. For so long I'd carried this weight, this belief that I had to be the bigger person, that forgiveness meant giving people what they wanted, that family meant sacrificing yourself. But boundaries aren't walls, they're doors. And I get to choose who I let in. I thought about Mom's tears, about the way Richard's hand had shaken when he held out that list of medical bills. Part of me still hurt for them, for the desperation in their eyes, for the fact that they'd fallen so far. But that didn't mean I had to catch them. I'd spent 17 years being told I wasn't enough, that I was disrespectful, that I didn't belong. I'd spent 22 years proving them wrong. I used to think forgiveness meant giving people what they wanted. Now I know it means giving myself what I need: peace. I finished my coffee, went inside, got back to my life, the life I built, the life no one could take from me. 6 months after they showed up on my doorstep, I received a letter, handwritten. My mother's handwriting. I recognized it immediately. The careful loops, the way she crossed her T's. I almost threw it away without opening it, but I didn't. I made tea, sat at my kitchen table, opened it. Dear Maya, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to read this. But I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I'm sorry I chose my own comfort over your safety. I'm sorry I stood there and watched Richard kick you out, and I didn't say a word. I was scared. I was weak. I told myself you'd be fine, that you were smart and capable, and you'd figure it out. But the truth is, I was just making excuses for my own cowardice. You were 17. You'd just lost your father. And I failed you. I think about that night all the time. I think about the look on your face when you walked out the door. I think about all the years we lost. I'm not writing to ask for money. I'm not writing to ask for anything except maybe, someday, the possibility that you might be able to forgive me. Richard and I are separated now, living apart. I finally found the courage I should have had 22 years ago. I know it's too late. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I needed you to know I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry. Love, Mom. I read it 3 times. Then I set it down and cried. Not because I forgave her, not because the letter made everything okay, but because it was something. An acknowledgement, an apology. An apology doesn't erase 22 years, but it's a start, maybe. I kept the letter for 3 months before I responded. I wrote and rewrote my reply a dozen times. Too harsh, too forgiving, too cold, too emotional. Finally, I settled on the truth. Mom, I received your letter. Thank you for the apology. It means more than you might think. But I need you to understand, an apology is just the beginning. It doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't undo the damage. I'm not ready for a relationship. I don't know if I ever will be. But I'm willing to consider the possibility under certain conditions. First, I won't have any contact with Richard. Not now, not ever. If rebuilding a relationship with you means having him in my life, then the answer is no. Second, we start slow. Letters or emails only. No phone calls. No visits, not yet, maybe not for a long time. Not. Third, you need to understand that I don't owe you anything. Not my time, not my energy, not my forgiveness. If I choose to let you back into my life, it's a gift, not an obligation. If you can accept these terms, then we can try. Slowly. Carefully. If you can't, I understand. But those are my boundaries. Maya. I mailed it before I could second-guess myself. 2 weeks later, she wrote back. I accept your terms. Thank you for giving me a chance. I'll wait as long as it takes. Love, Mom. We started exchanging letters. Once a month at first, then every few weeks. She told me about her life, about leaving Richard, about getting a small apartment and a job at a library. I told her about my business, about my garden, about the life I'd built. I wasn't closing the door forever, but I wasn't leaving it wide open either. So what did I learn from all of this? If there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this. You don't owe anyone access to your life just because they're family. Blood doesn't equal loyalty. DNA doesn't guarantee love. And forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. You can honor your boundaries and still be a good person. You can say no and still be kind. You can protect yourself and still have compassion for others' struggles. The people who truly love you will respect your limits. They won't push. They won't guilt. They won't show up after decades of silence demanding that you save them. I'm not bitter about what happened. I'm really not. In a strange way, being kicked out at 17 was the best thing that could have happened to me. It forced me to become strong, to become independent, to build a life on my own terms. Would I have chosen it? No. But I survived it. And I'm proud of who I became. I'm not bitter. I'm just boundaried. And that's a good thing. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's survival. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is say no. So that's my story. 22 years after being kicked out at 17, I stood on my own porch, the porch of a house I bought with my own money. And I said no. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to set a boundary with family? How did it go? Do you think I made the right choice? Or should I have helped them? Drop a comment below. Let's support each other. Share your story. You never know who might need to hear it. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe. Thank you for listening. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this story. It wasn't easy to share, but I hope it helped someone out there who's struggling with similar boundaries. If you enjoyed this, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about resilience, boundaries, and finding your voice. And here's a question for you. Do you think I should give my mom another chance or keep my boundaries firm? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. Take care of yourselves, and remember, you deserve respect, always.